的 keynote speaker。那接下来这位呢 ，Joe 他将会跟我们介绍 AWS Elastic Beanstalk。那这个呢是 Amazon 用来提供 Nodejs hosting 的一种 PaaS 服务。接下来呢 ，Joe 他将会我们介绍这个服务以及开发者要如何 deploy Nodejs 专案到 Elastic Beanstalk。请大家掌声鼓励。
You guys can hear me? Are we ready for English? Okay. Okay, I am going to show you guys Elastic Beanstalk. I'm going to bring up a Node.js application. We're going to run it inside of Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk, think of it as we kind of call it a container service. So basically, it'll set up all your AWS cloud resources. It'll set up auto-scaling policies so that if your website gets really popular, you'll have EC2 instances that will grow and take up capacity. It'll set up a load balancer for you. In this case, too, it'll set up a relational database service that sits on our back end that we manage for you. And it'll do all this stuff at no additional charge. So I should go ahead. I'll mention this now, or I'll forget. OK. A couple of things, or I'll forget. I'll put this up right now before we get started. First off, come on. First off, if you're interested, there goes my Mac. If you're interested, there is a survey at that first link. If you're able to fill out that survey, we'll give you an additional $25 US in credits. So if you want to follow along with me today and play around with AWS, especially if you're a new customer, there's that free tier that's included too. You're not going to hit any charges. I mean, you can play around and run Beanstalk today, and maybe it's going to be a couple of dollars. So feel free to go ahead and fill that out if you guys get a chance. I'll put this back up at the end. Also, I'm supposed to mention there is a user group. That's the link to their Facebook page. It's the Taipei user group? Taiwan-wide AWS user group. So let me ask you guys a quick question. Who here is a Node.js developer? Is anyone actually writing Node.js apps? You are? You are? Yeah. You want to help? You want to be my assistant? Yeah, okay, he'll come down. There's our candidate for our prize. Yeah, come on down. No, I've got a Node.js application up. I want to just have someone who knows what they're doing to actually modify it so that you guys can see it get deployed. Okay, here we go. So once I get going here, it'll take me a couple of minutes. I just want to show some stuff. And then I've got a Node.js application, and maybe you can make some modifications to it. We'll check in, and we'll deploy it to Beanstalk together. Sure. All right? OK. So let me show you guys a little bit with Beanstalk. Here's the interface in here. And there we go. Here's the interface here. So I actually have a pre-built Node.js environment set up. That I've made a really basic app. I'll show you guys the app real quick. And it's right here. And I'm using Express. And it's a very basic app. It's my hiking log. And that right now is running in Singapore. It's running with Node.js, Express. On the back end, it's using our own hosted MySQL database. I didn't have to set any of these things up. It's got a load balancer. So if you look here at the top, one of the things that we do quite often in AWS is we're going to give you a CNAME to your application, and we're going to use Route 53, our DNS server, in order to do that resolution. And what that allows us to do is you can move around your resources that way to different IP addresses, and we can load balance it, and we can bring up the different load balancer in a clustered way. So in reality, what you'd probably end up doing then is point your own CNAME to that. So so it's like myapp.joe.com. Now you can see some different aspects here. So one of the things we have here is the application actually on the back end. It's powered the versioning is all powered by Git. So as I've written more different versions of the app, I check it into my Git repository, and then I tell Beanstalk to go ahead and push out the different applications. So one thing that I've got that's quite useful as a developer is if I want to, I could take any of these old versions and redeploy it. and I'll bring it up into the production environment. The other thing that's interesting too, you're just going to stand and look pretty for a while. Okay. The other thing that you can do is you see I have this Node.js Express environment. Well, at any time I want, I can actually create new environments. So the version of the application and the environment, they're independent. So you could have like a test environment, a production environment, a dev environment, and then you could go ahead and deploy different types of the application there. If I want to, I could take an older version of this app and bring it up. Now, it'll take a few minutes for this to do it, so I'll kick it off and we'll come back to it. But one of the things I can do is I can pick how I want to deploy it. And so in this case, we've got PHP, Node, .NET, we've got Python, we got Ruby, we got Java. So here I just pick this environment. I can tell it to create the relational database. Oops. Oops, there we go. And then that's just going to run and actually build my whole Amazon environment in the background. I can pick the size of my instances that I want to run. I can put different security parameters in it. And you can do this with the API. You can do this with command line tools. You can do it. You could actually have Node.js create its own environment by using the Node.js SDK. I can create a MySQL database, give it 10 gigs of storage, secret password. No one's ever going to figure out admin. And the other thing I can do is actually have the database run across different availability zones in AWS. And think of an availability zone as a cluster of data centers. And so with the click of this single button, I'm now taking a piece of my architecture, which is usually a single point of failure, and I'm actually having it run across 2 different physical data centers. And I'll stay in sync so that if something happens to one of these databases, the hot standby will automatically come up and your Node.js application will fail over to it. So I'll just go ahead and let that get created in the background. Okay, we'll do your magic now. So here's my really simple Express app. And then here's my application modules. So why don't you, if you make a little bit of a change, I just want to show what it's like to go in and make a change and deploy it to Beanstalk. So that's actually the hack.jade. Old school again.
So what change should I make?
You can, anything that doesn't break it.
Okay.
So of course you can use your own development tools, you can do whatever you want. You can use your own repositories that you want for the source control, but you'll use Git for your actual deployment. Okay, so we've made some kind of change.
Yeah.
And we do Git, and you're going to add it. Oh, you can do commit. There you go. Yep. This is why I got an assistant. And now you're going to do not quite. It's Git, and then it uses a plugin. So AWS.push.
AWS.
Now Git, it still goes through Git. Yeah, AWS.push. Okay, I'll show you what's going to happen on the other end. Thank you. We'll make sure it works before you sit down. So if you see, something's happening on the back end. Can you guys see that? So my Node Express environment here is now updating itself. So that version is going to go through, and I've got it set up by default that AWS push actually pushes it out to production. And you'll see on the back end here, so there's an update that started. And then back here, is that the one you did? Yeah. So there's his actual change. So that's just going to get filtered out, and so that whole provisioning process is done for you. You don't have to do any pushing to production. You don't have to worry about keeping all that stuff up to date. And it's going to happen in such a way that if you have 1,000 servers or 10,000 servers or one server, it's the same amount of work. You don't have to worry about it. Now, depending on what's going on, that can take a few minutes. And I'll just show you guys some other stuff here. I'll do it here. So this is what's going on underneath the scenes. So there is my Node.js environment. So I still have total control over everything. So I can see all the different attributes I would as if I did this all myself. I got the status checks, I've got the monitoring going on. You can see I hit the web page there a little bit. And then what's happening with this is sitting up in Singapore. On the back of it is a managed relational database service. So you can see I have a bunch of databases running. There'll be one that's just dedicated to this app. That's going to probably be this one, yeah. So that's our relational database service that's hosted by us. It's a full MySQL database, but it's got some really cool attributes to it. First of all, it's actually automatically being backed up for me, and it's actually sending the transaction logs up to our storage service. That means I can roll back that database to any point in time as I want. So let's say I'm developing something, I changed the database, I made a mistake, I dropped the table, or I changed the data. I can always roll this back and create a new database on an old snapshot that it's automatically taken. And that's quite powerful. The other interesting things you can do with it is you can make it bigger. So if you've ever had an application and you wanted to see what would happen if you gave it more power on the database side, you can actually change this class and you can make it into something with maybe more RAM or more CPU or faster disks. And we'll go ahead and we'll patch it for you. We'll take care of all the different services. The other really cool thing you can do with it is you can add disk space to it. So if you ever had to deal with a real database, adding disk space can be quite painful. So we do all that kind of stuff for you. Let's see if we got deployed yet, huh? Oop. I brought you in as an expert.
Oh, I just added H2 tag.
I brought you in as an expert and you've done this to me.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. So one of the things we could also do with it, if we were worried about it, let's say we had a whole bunch of different things in our production environment. Let's say I had like 1,000 servers. One of the things I could do too is if I wanted to debug this and I didn't know where it was at, I can actually do this snapshot of the logs, and that will go to all my web servers now and pull in all those log files and put it on S3. So if I wanted to do some server-side logging on that app, I could. All right, let's see. Let's see what we got here. Do you know how to read this?
I think when I commit code, I also commit some changes that we don't want it.
No problem. So here's what we can do with it, right? I do this all the time. You know why? I'm a really bad programmer. Boom. So now we'll roll it back. Do you want to take a look? Do you think you have any mistake in there? You can take a look if you want. So I mean, there's a really common environment there. We just solved the problem, right? We had something went wrong, and we were able to roll back to that old version. So all that stuff's pretty easy to do. It's gonna.
I think I accidentally delete your app.js.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but But I didn't do anything. I just commit every changes.
It's okay. We'll
Can
roll
you
back.
roll back?
Yeah, we'll roll back. Well, we're rolling back in production in the environment. So this is actually going to redeploy the old version. So that's fine. It's okay. He doesn't get a book. He doesn't get a prize. Sorry. No prize for him. No prize. He destroyed my application.
Come on.
No. Okay. All right. So now it's actually going to roll it back. So let me just show you some things on what you have to do to actually get it to work with Beanstalk. So if you're familiar with Node.js and Express, you'll see that this is a very standard setup. There's nothing special that you have to do with it. I just have to add one little thing. And this is how I can control my configuration. So in this case, I've got a static configuration with Express, but you can do different types of configurations. So that's really the only thing you have to do to add to your application to deploy it with Node.js. That's it. It's that one file. Now you've got the ability to control everything through the UI here. We actually have command line tools. This is my Elastic Beanstalk command line tool. I can go in here and I can create new applications. If you're already working on a Node.js project, you can actually just go ahead and tell it to take your current project in that directory. You can do an EB init, and that will actually go and create the equivalent Beanstalk environment to host your application. Shall we see if we saved ourselves? Yay! So I rolled it back. So we're okay. But thanks for trying.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it. Okay, so let me show you some cool stuff that it does. And if you guys have any questions, just let me know. So the way this architecture works, the way it looks right now, is we've got Route 53 who's actually setting up this CNAME. And this is actually pointing to a load balancer right now. And that load balancer is a highly scalable, elastic load balancer. It's highly available. It's hosted by us. As your traffic goes up, you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to change anything to it. Behind that right now is a single little EC2 instance that's handling my traffic. And that's this guy right here. So it's actually just a little micro instance. It's the smallest instance we have. Come on, Internet. And it's handling all the different web requests right now. There we go. So there it is right there. So that's handling all my different web requests. Now, let's have some fun with it. Shall we do a distributed denial of service attack on my little Node.js app? I'll show you what happens with it. So here's my app. It's running on what we call a T1 micro. That's our smallest, least expensive instance. It's not very powerful. It's probably more suitable to development and test, not really to production work. What happens, let's say, for example, I built my Node.js application. I get featured maybe in the news, or I launch for all my customer base. The customers start hitting the website, and I'm running on this T1 micro. It's going to get saturated pretty quickly, right? It's just a tiny little instance. It's not going to be able to handle thousands and thousands of customers, for example, or thousands and thousands of requests. So what we're able to do with that, and this is kind of what I talked about at the keynote, is through that power of the cloud, the AWS cloud, you get this concept of elasticity. And we do that through this auto-scaling feature. So let me show you how that works real quick. So you see this tab here? This is auto-scaling for AWS. So in this case, I'm only going to have a minimum of one instance. Now, that's probably not best practices. If it was a production system, I'd probably want to have a minimum of 2 instances, right? That way, just in case if something happened to one in the one availability zone, the other one can actually kind of keep running. I've got a maximum number of instances that I want to have. So, literally, you can put up to, in this UI, 10,000 instances. So we can have some very large customers running on this. In this case, I've just got 8. And as it starts adding instances, I'm going to want it to spread these instances across different availability zones. So this is coming out of Singapore. In Singapore, we have 2 sets of clusters of data centers there. They're physically as far apart as we can get in Singapore, which isn't actually that far apart because Singapore is pretty small. But they have multiple internet connectivity. They can talk to each other really well because what we've done to it is a laid network between these 2 availability zones, so the latency is really, really low. So if you have the database in one, it can talk to the web server on the other availability zone, can talk to that database across the availability zones with really low latency. And then here's what I've done with some metrics. What time do we end? What time does it wrap up? Oh, I got 60 minutes, okay. So what I'm going to do in this case is across all the instances that I have running, if the average CPU usage is above 80%, I'm going to want it to add an instance. Now, if this is a really big production system, probably, I would probably have it go at different kind of granularity. I could say, for example, I want you to add 2 instances, because that way, as the system grows up, it'll put like 1 in each availability zone, and it'll scale across all of our infrastructure. And then, equally as important, after I've scaled up, maybe at night people aren't using my application, I want to scale it back down because I don't want to pay for it. So when the CPU drops below 50%, I want you to start scaling down. And I'll scale it all the way down until I've got the minimum number of instances. So Pinterest is a company that does this very, very well. They scale it up and down all the time. So here's what we're going to do. This is CloudWatch. This gives me an insight into everything that's running within the AWS stack. So what I'm going to do with this is that one single little EC2 instance that's sitting there. It's unaware. It's not bothering anybody. So let's go ahead and attack it. So I'm going to use one of my favorite tools to do that. I'm going to use one called Bees with Machine Guns. And Bees with Machine Guns is an open source tool. It was written on top of AWS by the Chicago Tribune in the US. And what it will do is actually use our Python API and create instances that will then attack and do a distributed denial of service attack on whatever web address I tell it to do. Do not use this against somebody else and say Joe said to do it, all right? You'll get in trouble. But I can do it for load testing, absolutely. This is a great way to be able to test how my changes have affected my production environment, because I can create a copy of that same production environment with Beanstalk after I've done some code changes, and I'll be able to say, hey, look, I've actually slowed things down. Okay, so there, I've SSH'd into my EC2 instance. And I'm going to bring up 10 bees. So it's using the Python API called Boto right now. It's calling out to EC2, the EC2 service, and it's saying, create me 10 new instances. You could do it in Node.js if you wanted to. What's going to happen here is you see these guys all coming up? These are my bees. So they're all coming up online. And just go so you guys can see. You see that there's that other environment that I created as an example. So there I've created a whole other copy of my application. Since I started this presentation, there's a whole other environment now running on Beanstalk. I didn't have to do anything. Okay, the bees are assembled. There we go. Okay, so here's my victim. So he's sitting there quietly minding his own business. And I'm going to hammer it. I'm going to hit as many requests against my hiking application as I can from 10 different servers, just smashing it. So what's going to happen is, in the real environment, if you had auto-scaling, you probably wouldn't have traffic that just kind of smashes it like that. You'd probably have something that ramps up, during the morning as more users get on. So it does take a little bit of time for it to respond. But let's go ahead and attack it. Okay. So now the bees are getting ready, and they're just going to hit it with a whole bunch of HTTP requests. Now what you should see happening on this side is I'm going to slow down. It's going to take longer for it to start to come up as more and more of these requests come in. And eventually it's going to saturate my poor little EC2 instance. Now this monitoring I've got set up, it actually does a sample every minute. So it's going to take it just 1 minute. And what we'll see is this average CPU utilization is going to start shooting up. So there's a link between auto-scaling and CloudWatch. I can do any of these metrics I want in order to tell my system to go ahead and do that elasticity to pull up that horizontal scaling. In this case, it'll be that average CPU, but I could do it in terms of latency. I could even have my application tell AWS to go ahead and to bring up auto-scaling directly. Or I could do time. I could say at 5 p.m. everything stops running. Looks like we're really causing some pain to it. So all 10 of those EC2 instances are now hitting my Node.js application. 3 of the bees are saying that they can't even see the application anymore. So I'm pretty sure that it's probably fairly well saturated. Yeah. So my application is not happy at this point. So what's happening? Let's take a look. So I can go in and I can look at the metrics of the EC2 instance, and this will start jumping up. But then I can also go in here, and we can see what's going on through the Beanstalk interface. So you see my latency is now starting to go up. And these guys are still hammering it. And you can see my networks are starting to go up, and my requests are starting to go up. Okay. So the way the environment's going to respond to this is we'll start to see a bunch of new EC2 instances will start to take off here. And sometimes it takes it a minute or two for it to actually launch it. But we'll also be able to see all the events will be logged in here. So what we'll see is it'll say bringing up new EC2 instance, bringing up new EC2 instance. Still killing it. All right. Okay, we'll give that a couple of minutes while it starts to bring up the new instances. Other things you can do in Beanstalk while that's coming up. So you can do multiple different types of languages in this environment. You really don't have to do anything in terms of configuration. Some of the things you can do with it, if you want, is you can load pretty much any kind of software you want onto it. So within the EC2 instance, when you actually create everything in here, we can, for example, we can include what's called a custom AMI. And an AMI is an Amazon machine image. So if I wanted to, let's say I had a very, very specific setup for my application. I've installed a lot of software on it. I have dependencies outside of just the Node.js. I need to have control over that environment. I can create my own EC2 instance. I can go in and then snapshot that EC2 instance, and I'll create an Amazon machine image. and then I can have that and hand it over to Beanstalk. So you have full control over that environment. You can set up any type of software that you want. And I'm just running out of time. Let's just see if our Beanstalk has grown. So latency is huge at this point. See how the load balancer's doing. Well, unfortunately, I'm just running out of time, but it's actually growing. It's actually spinning up the instance, but I'm running out of time to be able to show you guys that. So, if you're interested and you want to know more about it, oh, there we go. So, there. I completely destroyed my application. So in the background, what's happening now is all these new EC2 instances are coming up. They're getting joined to that load balancer, and they're going to spread the requests going forward. So this is a little bit of an outlier in the fact that you don't normally get like a DDoS attack. If you had traffic kind of scaling up, we would actually be able to scale it up in time, ahead of time, over those requests so that you wouldn't see anything slowing down. But I've run out of time, so I'll have my laptop and everything. I can show anyone who's interested. I'll be in the back with the AWS guys, and I can show you how the auto-scaling is actually pulling the application together and scaling it out. So thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. And check out the user group if you can. And if you need that survey form, the URL again, I'll be at the back. Thanks. That's yours.
Hey, thanks for just sharing, and it's time's up. And